Guys, there's really no other way to say it. This is just embarrassing, and we gotta fix this.
Toys for life.
My C5 just turned 20 years old, and while I was making those electric system testing videos recently, I noticed that my master cylinder reservoir was looking pretty dark and dingy. Now, although you really can't see the brake fluid through the translucent reservoir, it seems pretty clear to me that mine's dirty, and the last time I checked, it's supposed to be light colored and clear. Oh, now that doesn't look good. So to be sure I'm not just imagining things and trying to fix things that aren't broken, I'm going to take a sample of brake fluid out of my C5's reservoir and compare it to some brand new brake fluid right out of the bottle. Now, to obtain the sample for my C5's reservoir, I'm simply going to use this water pick style syringe. You can use a Mighty Vac as well, or a turkey baster, whatever you've got. Just make sure it's perfectly clean, because you don't want to contaminate your brake fluid, even though you're going to change it with any sort of foreign liquid. Now guys, take a good look at this. Here's the new brake fluid that I just got out of the bottle, and it looks, well, new. And here's the brake fluid that came out of my C5, and it looks like used engine oil. Yikes. Now there's more than a few people that think changing your C5's brake fluid is not something you need to worry about. And to be fair, I scoured the 2003 Corvette Owner's Manual, and even though it references brake fluid 30 times, not once does it mention anything about a change interval. Now, I don't know about you, but to me that seems pretty goofy, so I did some digging, and I see in the 2016 Corvette Owner's Manual, it recommends changing your brake fluid every 5 years, and to me that seems pretty reasonable, especially if I want my C5 to perform optimally, and I plan on keeping it a while. Now, even if you place zero faith in that 2016 Corvette brake fluid change interval recommendation, would you want this brake fluid in your C5 Corvette? I don't know about you, but there's clearly plenty of particles suspended in this fluid, and the idea of them settling out in my expensive anti-lock brake system just doesn't seem like a good idea. Also, brake fluid is extremely hygroscopic, which simply means that it loves to pull moisture out of the air, and what that does is it decreases the boiling point of the brake fluid, and that translates into problems if you're doing any sort of performance driving with your C5 that heats up the brakes. So since I've had my C5 for 10 years now and I've never changed the brake fluid, it's more than past due, so let's get started. Alright guys, so I've got the C5 up on the lift, but you can also use a floor jack and jack stands. You just need to get it up high enough to get the tires off so you can get at the brake calipers, which we'll need to do a few steps down the road. If you need any tips about how to get your C5 off the ground with the floor jack and jack stands, just be sure to check out the video in your upper right hand corner. Guys, a quick warning before we go any further. If you weren't aware, brake fluid and automotive paint absolutely do not mix. If you happen to spill a little on your paint, you're going to want to blot it off right away and then go get some soap and water and make sure you thoroughly clean that area. Also, plastic and rubber will deteriorate over time and with exposure to underhood engine temperatures. So take a moment to look at your reservoir, check it for any kind of cracks, and then also take a look at your cap and the rubber expansion washer to make sure they're in good shape and that they're sealing properly. If it does turn out that yours is in need of replacement, your best bet is to purchase a new AC Delco master cylinder assembly for around $90, and then go ahead and swap the reservoir tank that comes on it into your C5. You used to be able to simply buy a new reservoir tank, but that's no longer the case, so at least this way you get the whole assembly for $90. That way you've got a new master cylinder on the shelf in case you ever need it, or you could probably sell it on eBay. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to remove as much of that nasty brake fluid as possible using a Mighty Vac, and I've also got an assortment of tubing. The main thing is any tubing that you stick inside the reservoir has to be clean. It can't have any traces of oil on it or gas, because if you contaminate your brake system, that's not a good thing. Now once you've sucked out as much of the brake fluid as possible from inside your reservoir, there's still going to be kind of a thin dark layer of film on the inside, but in most cases like mine, it's just cosmetic, so I'm not going to worry about it. Now if for some reason you do have some sort of debris or larger chunks in the bottom of your reservoir, you're going to want to remove the reservoir from the master cylinder and either clean it or replace it so that debris doesn't get down into your expensive anti-lock brake components. The next thing we have to do is decide what kind of brake fluid to put in the C5. From the factory it came with DOT3 brake fluid, which when it's new has a boiling point of about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, but it does absorb moisture through the years at a rate of about 2% a year, and that trends down closer to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Because it has roughly a 10% higher boiling point, many C5 enthusiasts use DOT4 brake fluid in their C5 Corvette, and from everything I know, it is in fact compatible with DOT3 brake fluid and in your C5 Corvette, at least in warm weather anyway, so that's something you might want to research and consider. You might be wondering why I even brought up the boiling points of DOT3 and DOT4 brake fluid, and the truth is, for most of us that just do spirited street driving or occasionally slow down from 130 miles an hour in the quarter mile. But if you're doing any sort of track events where you're constantly accelerating and then braking hard and then you repeat this over and over again, the brakes get extremely hot, that heat gets into the caliper and of course the brake fluid, and if that brake fluid boils, you're in big trouble. So if road course racing and track use like that is your thing, you're definitely going to want to investigate DOT4 brake fluid a little bit more, and I think it's even DOT5.1. But for me, DOT3 is sufficient for everything I needed to do for my C5, so this is what I'm going to continue to use. And now finally, with all of that out of the way, let's actually do some work and bleed these brakes.
First, I'm going to go ahead and fill the reservoir up right up to the top with new, previously unopened brake fluid, because as we've learned, brake fluid is like a sponge and likes to absorb moisture out of the air. Next, I'm going to go ahead and attach my Motive Power Brake Bleeder to the reservoir and pump it up to about 15 psi, and then give it a minute or so to make sure it's not leaking air. Now I'm going to move to the first caliper to be bled, and that actually will depend on what year C5 that you have. Since the bleeder screw has not been removed in quite some time, it might be stubborn, so I'm going to go ahead and break it loose with a 10mm 6-point socket so I don't strip it out. Then I'm going to go ahead and slide a rubber hose over the bleeder nipple and then a 10mm combination wrench over the hose so that I can break it loose, allowing the fluid to drain into a suitable container. A few short minutes later, you'll have plenty of nasty brake fluid collected in your jug, and now it's time to check your master cylinder reservoir, make sure there's still plenty of fluid left, and there's pressure in your Motive bleeder. If your reservoir is getting a little bit low or you're in doubt, go ahead and release the pressure of your Motive bleeder, and then open it up and top it off with more brake fluid. Moving on to the next caliper to be done, it's pretty much the same ordeal. Break the bleeder screw loose with a 6-point socket, insert your hose and combination wrench, but this time let's use a smaller cup. We'll fill it up right away with some dirty fluid, and then we'll empty that cup, and then we'll fill it up again, and you'll see the difference in just a short amount of time. Now just proceed to finish the last two calipers in order, being sure to frequently check the fluid level in your reservoir and top off the pressure in the power bleeder. Earlier I mentioned that I don't recommend the pumping the brakes method of bleeding for older cars like our C5s. Over time, a ridge can develop in the bores where the master cylinder piston seals have always stopped. This can be due to a little bit of wear and also a little bit of corrosion in the cylinder where the brake piston seal doesn't reach on a typical daily basis. If all of a sudden we start pumping the brakes past this point because we're bleeding them, once in a while you'll damage a piston seal, and now our little brake bleeding project has gotten a lot more involved. By properly using a power bleeder, this risk is virtually eliminated.
So guys, if you like this video and you learned something from it, please throw me a bone by hitting the thumbs up below and leaving a comment so that YouTube knows to share it with the C5 community. And as always, thanks for watching.